Go ahead and get started. Would you please take roll?
Ms. Atkins?
Here.
Mr. Houston?
Here.
Mrs. McDaniel?
Here.
Mrs. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. Stoffer?
Here.
Mr. Wydrich?
Here.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Here. Can I get a motion to approve the March 20, 2023 agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Ms. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Houston?
Yes.
Mrs. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer?
Yes.
Mr. Wydrich?
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes. Now we'll have the 2023-2024 school calendar change hearing. Has this been duly promoted or advertised?
Yeah, so
The
we
only
have,
requirement is the notice of
Okay,
the
all right.
so that's, sorry, so I'm logging on here.
I know, me too.
So two-step deals.
Mine, I just have to remember what password I need to get on.
Yeah, that's, so I'll update, but I guess, do we discuss it now? Later on. Oh, there we go, sorry about that.
Looks like we'll discuss it during discussion items, so.
Okay, but do you want to go ahead and go through it
Yep,
now?
yeah, we absolutely can. Yep,
Okay.
so if Dave wants to pull up the calendar for us.
Is it in the share folder or
It should be a part of the agenda.
all part of the agenda?
Yep.
Okay.
I think it's under the discussion item.
Isn't it a discussion item? Oh my goodness, enter old password.
Yeah, I saw it in there.
This thing is not letting me. Okay, we'll just close it up for now. So looking up here, so basically what we've done is I went ahead and did I know this was approved last spring. Since then, there were some just conversations about parents maybe wanting another look at it and having an opportunity to give feedback on it and et cetera. So we did put out a survey in December. Parents, we had, as I shared before, we had really good feedback from parents. It was almost universal, so we sent it out to all parents, and I had a separate survey go out to all staff. It was almost universal that the number one thing that both sides wanted was to get out before Memorial Day. That was that's how the question posed. Number two was that they didn't want anything to happen to winter break, so we make sure we have a winter break. And number three was that they wanted a spring break, and so like a whole week-long spring break. And looking at a lot of different options, and we've spent the last few months sharing this several different times with I know the BLTs have shared it. I've gone to buildings and shared it with staff and had conversations about it. We've shared it with our cabinet team and our admin team, and we've just had a lot of conversation around it about how can we work with our current schedule to get it to do a few things for us. One is because we're on trimesters, we have to make sure that we balance the 3 trimesters, so as much as possible, which means that they end on a certain day, and then we have a time for grading, and then the next trimester can start. We never want to end a trimester in the middle of a week, because it's hard to start a trimester. Let's say you end on a Thursday and you have a next day Friday. Kids just totally forget and they don't understand. And so ending at the end of the week and starting the beginning of the next day. It's also important, the reason we have them balanced is because if you have, and it sounds silly, but let's say you have 63 days in one trimester and then you have a long break, and you have 55 days in the next trimester, well, it only sounds like 8 days, but that's essentially 2 weeks. So when you talk about the same classes being taught the same in 2 different trimesters, having to cover the same amount of material, but in 8 less days or almost a week and a half less of time is very difficult. And so making sure that they stay balanced. We were pretty close in this calendar to get it. You'll see 60, 60, and 56. The reason I'm okay with this balance is because the first 2 days of school, 2 to 3 days, are usually a strict, like get to know you type of deal. Routines, welcome back from summer, etc. So you're already losing a couple days in that first trimester. The second one that we talked about is the middle trimester. That's during the winter months. So you almost always lose 2 to 3 to 4, hopefully not more than that, days in that middle trimester. And so by the time everything shakes out, this actually becomes really even, so that 60 really turns into a 58 or 57. The second 60 turns into another 58 or 57, 56 maybe. And then the last one, you rarely have a missed day in the third trimester. I'm going to knock now because we're in that third trimester, so I don't want to necessarily curse us at this point. We don't need any more snowstorms.
Like that have a May
Yeah,
snowstorm,
definitely don't
yeah.
need that, yeah. And so the balancing act worked pretty well. A couple of things that popped out as far as what parents were really concerned about, numerous conversations about the numbers of days that we miss, And so when we looked at this calendar, it was what days can we kind of weed out so we don't have quite so many days. And then teachers too said, like for instance, they did not want a PD day on that. Originally they had a September 1st PD day, so basically a PD day before Labor Day. Neither staff nor parents thought that was necessary, and so removed that September 1st PD day, and basically added it back to the beginning of the year. And so in looking at that, and then we took off other days throughout the year, or another day throughout the year. But another thing that came through kind of at the end was they would really like an opportunity to have one more professional development day at the beginning of the year, because we're always trying to squeeze in back to school PD time. I know, for instance, we've talked about the elementary in general is looking at letters training. We've done capturing kids' hearts in the past. CHAMPS is something that we've just started rolling out at the district or at the building levels, but maybe taking a look at how we can do that at the district level to really hone in on that classroom management, expectations, building relationships, those types of things that we really need at this point. So adding another day at the beginning of the year. So it's not another day off in the middle of the year, but it's a day that teachers can come back and kind of get accustomed to getting the school year off on a good footing. Moving down through October, you'll see that, we still end that trimester. We still have conferences in October. No real change to the conferences. We are still allowing in the beginning of the year, I'm going to back up, I missed something, and in the beginning of the year, we're still doing the alternate days. Depending on, I was actually kind of surprised. I kind of heard some negatives about kind of the alternating starting schedules, particularly at Craft and Titan Hill, where you have one class come one day and the next class comes the next, and then all kids come the third day. But really, at the end of the day, parents were largely okay with it when I saw their surveys they received back. So I said it's worth doing another year of that. So I'm not going to have them change that. Going back through November. Now we're going to move forward. So looking at November, we still have that that trimester ending right before Christmas, or right before Thanksgiving, and then still having those 3 days of Thanksgiving. That was another thing that they wanted to make sure that we kept, were those 3 days of Thanksgiving. Looking at December, so originally we were out of school on the 20th of December. So we went the 18th and 19th, and then we were out of school the 20th through, then we came back the 3rd. And so in order to get a spring break and get us out before Memorial Day, which is impossible, I couldn't do a week-long spring break and get us up before Memorial Day. But when I started asking people like in depth, like parents and teachers, like, is it spring break or is it Memorial Day that we're looking at? Or is it, we just don't want to go to school in June, you know? And really that was largely what it is. So that gave us a little more flexibility. So I said, okay, so if we're going to go get out before June and we're going to have a week-long spring break, something's got to give because we got to have X amount of staff days. And so we looked at that, you know, do we really need to get out on the 20th of December, 5 days before Christmas? We really have to do that. Or can we get out maybe that Friday, have an early dismissal that Friday because kids are chomping at the bit to get out anyway, and then, you know, have a little bit of a shortened Christmas or a winter break? And the answer was largely yes. Like, if that gives us a longer break later in the year, let's do it. And so that's what it got changed to. So instead of the 20th, we go all the way through the 22nd, but it still gives the 23rd and 24th before Christmas, so it works out just fine. Coming back on the 3rd, the next thing the teacher said was it's really hard after being out for a long break to come right back in with kids. So before, like that 3rd, the teacher's coming back for the first day, and so are all the kids coming back the first day. And that's really hard for everybody, for helping kids regulate back in the classroom, helping, you know, because teachers are coming in hot. And so we talked about giving them a professional development day on that day as well. So it's mostly just shuffling these days around. So looking at teachers come back on the 3rd, kids coming back on the 4th, and then originally the next change we had was Martin Luther King Jr. Day on January 15th was originally a no school day for everybody. And then the 19th, February 19th was President's Day, was a professional development day. I made the suggestion to switch those 2 days because otherwise we were not going to have a single day off without winter break, without a snow day from January 3rd and through until the end of March. And so I said, you know, we're not going to have, I mean, there's not going to be a single vacation day in there. So what if we said, let's have a PD day on Martin Luther King Day, and then we have a, everybody gets off on President's Day. So at least we have one day halfway through that time period where everybody kind of has a shortened week. And so, you know, people were largely like, yep, that sounds wonderful. Let's do that. So then again, we have conferences the same way we've done them. We kept with, this year we switched and we did a 2-hour early for high school and middle school for conferences. It helped out tremendously. Got a ton of really positive feedback from parents because their conference time got extended. It didn't feel as rushed as it was before. And then when you look at, sorry, I'm kind of going through this fast. If you guys have any questions as I'm talking, don't be afraid to speak up. Looking forward, then we talked about, you know, March, again, that March 1st is the end of the second trimester. They've had a staff work day traditionally on that day. And then the spring break would be the week of Easter. So right now, Easter is set to happen on March 31st. And so having that 25th through 29th be our spring break, because it lines up well with that Good Friday we have off anyway, that gives them a spring break during that week as well. So we're pretty much able to make everything happen. Would not have that Good Monday off, which that was largely okay. That was very low on people's priority list. You will see a big change here with the April conferences. one of the things that we talked about that came out through the parent conferences was they didn't want to have as many days off. And they talked about, and then I talked, in talking with the elementary staff, it seems like the spring conferences are by far the least attended. And remember, for every conference that the elementary has, that's 2 days off of school. So they have Thursday and Friday off of school for every conference. And so we said, we've already met twice. We've met in the beginning of the school year. We've met a couple months prior to this. If parents really want to touch base with teachers, I mean, now with technology and phones and everything else, like, they can reach out anytime and have a meeting with teachers. But if we said, you know what, we'll keep conferences for middle school, high school because they have trimester courses, so they need to make sure they're touching base with parents. But we're going to look to eliminate the spring conferences for elementary. There's really no need to have them, just except if parents want to touch base with teachers again, they absolutely can. And it gives us 2 days of classes that we'd otherwise gotten, not had, puts kids back in the classroom for those 2 days. And so, so that's one of the things, and that was pretty widely celebrated amongst the staff as well, I believe. So, and don't get me wrong, again, any time a teacher or parent reaches out, we're going to meet with them. Like, it's going to happen. So, and then at the end of the year, you can see coming back for what we call finals days on that May 28th, 29th, teachers last day on the 30th, and then we're done. So we got out before June. So we still have a Christmas break, still have a Thanksgiving break, still have a week-long spring break. Added a day in the beginning of the year for conferences for teachers, or not conferences, but professional development for teachers, and still getting out before June 1st. Another change you'll see is that in the past, we used to delineate between what was a professional development day for staff and what was a teacher work day where they got to work in their classrooms. I went to the teachers and said, this is kind of like ridiculous. Like, can we combine everything? Just call it a PD/work day. So that way, if we want to schedule a couple hours of PD in the morning, because nobody wants to sit through an 8-hour PD, but nobody necessarily needs to work 8 hours. I shouldn't say nobody. A lot of people don't have to work 8 hours straight in their classroom. So if we can mix and match and say, hey, we're gonna do a little PD in the morning, we're gonna work time in the afternoon, or work time in the morning and PD in the afternoon, just as long as we try to honor the work time that we've kind of scheduled in the past. And they were largely on board with that as well. So anyway, that's kind of how the schedule kind of panned out. I do not have one for the 24-25 school year yet, because we were trying to see. We have had started discussions about trimesters versus semesters. So we're trying to work through that a little bit as far as pros and cons. We are far from making that decision. Will not happen for quite some time. And so I will come out with a calendar recommendation using trimesters for the 24-25 school year sometime next month. But for right now, this is just a change to the 23-24 school year. So overall, I think it's a win, and it really showed that we valued both teacher or staff and parent feedback. So,
Has there been any feedback on having commencement on the holiday weekend?
I was told we don't touch that.
I would say touch it. You do like it on the weekend?
I think it gives people a chance to travel.
Yeah, that's what I've heard over the years, that people like the holiday because they can have family travel. There was one year, I believe it was not on that weekend. I think it was later in June, but I don't remember why it was, but it's been on that weekend a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I think the reason we did that year was because of the later calendar and the number of days that seniors can be dismissed prior to the end of the school year.
Okay. Is there anyone that is listening online or anyone in the audience that has questions? This is a public hearing. Or if any board members have questions, you can go ahead and ask at this time too. We will have this as, it is an agenda item. So if you think of any other questions, the board can discuss it then also.
Yep.
Okay. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and close the hearing for the 2023-2024 school calendar. And we'll go on to commendations and good news. Titan Hill teachers, letters, LETRS training. We'll start with that.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
We'll start with introductions. I'm Mrs. Barker, principal at Titan Hill.
Hello, Mrs. Hoffman, the associate principal at Titan Hill.
And I'm Mindy Brewer, I teach second grade at Titan.
We did have a few other second grade teachers that were going to join us tonight, but plans got changed a little bit with sitters and things that came up. So Mrs. Hoffman will share, one of our teachers who was going to be here, send an email with some feedback, but I'll give you just a little bit of background about letters training. Our letters journey at Titan Hill started last year, and it evolved out of our PLC Plus process. So prior to PLC Plus going district-wide, Titan Hill did a book study on the PLC Plus kind of process, and we started to implement it last year. So at the end of last year, basically the core of PLC Plus is teacher teams get together, they look at data, they identify an area of need, and then they search for and engage in learning that's going to help them to progress and better meet students and address that need. So at the end of last year, second grade noticed a need in the incoming second graders for their foundational reading skills. So in the PLC, we were like, what can we do? What information do we have? So we engaged with Carrie Olson from our AEA, and she shared with us some background and some success stories with the letters training program. Second grade jumped on board with this 2-year training opportunity, and we are just finishing out our first year. We have our test coming up in like 3 weeks, or no, a month. We're a little bit nervous about it, but we'll do okay. We included, in addition to the second grade teachers, we included our title reading interventionists. We included our special education teacher that serves our second grade students. We included our English language teacher, Mrs. Hoffman and myself both engaged, and one of our instructional coaches engaged in this learning as well. The learning has been so incredibly impactful that we are now beginning a second cohort of letters learners that will start next year. We made a really intentional decision on how to expand letters into our building based on our targeted IEP subgroup from our ISASP test from last spring. So we are bringing on a little over half of our third grade teachers, the third grade teachers who serve our special education clusters. In third grade, we're also bringing on all of the rest of our special education teachers, and I believe that is it for next year. So we're really intentional about making sure that we're hitting our building goals while still expanding this learning at Titan Hill, and fingers crossed, the great experiences that we've had will continue to be shared within the building and motivate our 4th and 5th grade teachers and the rest of our 3rd grade teachers to come on board as well, so we can have a fully trained building within the next few years. So before we share a little bit about the impact that letters has had, the letters is basically the science of reading. It's how the brain learns to read, and it helps us better understand the scope, the sequence, and the process that the brain uses to learn to read. And so as you hear all this, you're probably thinking, well, of course, all elementary teachers should probably have this in their undergraduate coursework. We do not. As an example, now granted this was a while ago, right? I've done this for a while, but way back when I did my undergraduate work, I had a minor in reading, and then I also went back and got my graduate degree in reading as well. And the things that I'm learning in letters were not taught to me in either one of those programs. So it's a lot of very valuable information that for some reason is not made readily available to teachers, but is so very important to teachers. So I'm going to let Mrs. Hoffman share as a teacher testimony, and then Ms. Brewer will also share the impact that she's felt that letters has had.
Hello, this testimony comes from one of our second grade teachers, and she shares, whenever I tell fellow educators that I'm in letters training, I hear, wow, you are so lucky. Letters training has given me a better insight on not only how to teach phonics to primary students, but the sequence in which those fundamentals should be taught. It has provided me with the resources that I utilize in whole group, such as whiteboard practice with dictated words and sentences, as well as decodable passages that we read and discuss together. The kids love going on word hunts and doing word ladders. Everything is taught explicitly and hands-on, so it keeps their attention. They love the feeling of accomplishment at the end of the week when we do dictation sentences and they have spelled all of their words correctly. Letters has also changed the way I feel about small group reading. While there is a huge place for guided reading, we have incorporated phonics work as well. Here I am able to use my assessments to group students based on phonics needs. I have seen a huge improvement in their writing and reading skills thanks to letters.
And I would agree with all those things that Kristen said. As Mrs. Barker said, we started to look at this at the end of last year. And like a lot of school districts, we had definitely seen learning loss after COVID. And having those incoming second graders didn't necessarily have some of those foundational skills that we might have hoped for. And so when we learned about the Letters program and started participating in it, it honestly, truly has been transformational. I don't use that word lightly. But it has focused the people who participated in it. It's really focused our attention and our thinking about how to teach reading and phonics more effectively. The training is really about teaching the teachers the skills to utilize to teach, to better instruct students. One of the most surprising things that I learned was that most of us assume that when children learn to read, they recognize letters. It's mostly visual memory, but it's actually mostly auditory memory. And so that's been really impactful in us thinking about how children need to learn about, not just know their alphabet, but think about what sounds are made by what letters, and really kind of connecting some of that auditory learning as well. So it's really been, like I said, it's been very kind of uplifting to the second graders, because our second grade teachers, because although we've struggled with a little bit of guilt of thinking, well, why wasn't I teaching this before? Our mantra is kind of, you don't know what you don't know. And so we've been really grateful to have the opportunity to learn some of these different skills and to learn some of the thinking behind it. Just like we try to teach kids the why of what they're learning, we're learning the why of why we need to start adapting the way that we change our teaching. So it's been a really wonderful experience, and I definitely hope that I know that other staff members, I think, will benefit from it as well. So.
And all of this is funded by our teacher quality money that our teachers can request to use for learning opportunities. And so just a testimony to how important those funds are for our teachers' learning and growth and for our students' achievement.
Thank you so much.
Does anyone have any questions?
How old is the program?
I'm not sure how old the program is, but they've been really doing a push over the last few years. I know when I first came to Titan Hill, Carrie Olson came and talked to me about doing letters at Titan Hill at that time. And I was like, I'm brand new, I gotta learn a whole lot right now. I gotta see kind of where our needs are. So we didn't start it then, but there was a big push about 4 or 5 years ago for all of the schools in the area. And I know a lot of schools in Iowa are engaging in the training.
And it's very time intensive. I mean, it's a 2-year process, so it's not something that it's not one PD day and you're kind of you check it off your list. So it's definitely a time commitment. And so I think that's why maybe a lot of, schools aren't necessarily, it takes a lot of, like I said, it takes a lot of commitment, so.
And how long is the training? Just the year? Is it like a 2-3 year?
Great question. It is 2 years total.
Okay.
So we typically we started this year, our cohort with 2 full days in August. Next year, I believe we're starting with 1 full day in August. We have a really talented group, so we were a little bit ahead as we got through the year. And then I believe we did 3 full days, and then we do some 3 to 5 after school, our early outs 3 to 5, and then we've done some work on our PD days as well.
Okay.
So all in all, our cohort 1 will be completely finished at the end of next year.
Is there any ideas to transfer this to the elementary? And is this something that could be utilized at the elementary level, get more involved in starting them off earlier?
Absolutely, and from what I understand, there's been conversations about that. I think Carrie Olson has had some conversations. They, at Craft, I believe they do some other trainings as well, Orton Gillingham, and they do some different things with foundational reading and phonics. But I do know those conversations are happening.
Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
You can come anytime. We always like
Absolutely.
visitors.
There's lots of good things to share.
Okay, do we have some more commendation and good news?
That's it for right now, just because we know we have to get through presentation tonight, and I have some stuff I want to touch on in my report, so.
Okay, well, I do want to mention, unless you were going to, that we did receive the award for the
Oh, yeah.
unbelievable, is that what it is?
Yep,
Unbelievable workplaces?
Yep, so the Council of Chamber of Commerce did the Unbelievable Workplaces again this year. Sorry, thank you.
No,
reminding
you're
me of that. And so we did receive the award again, this third year in a row. And so we went to the presentation, so it was a very nice presentation and down at the Hop Center. And we feel there was a lot of other really good businesses around Council Bluffs who also received the awards, so we're in very good company. So
Absolutely.
overall, our survey survey results came back and showed that, you know, whereas every organization has areas they want to improve upon, I think by and large, our employees appreciate our organization focus, you know, just kind of the culture that we have here and the working conditions we have here at Lewis Central are just phenomenal. And I think it's one of the reasons why, you know, we see a lot of when we have applicants, we get a lot of teachers who, you know, will look to come to us just because of what they've heard about our district. So, I mean, that's always the best kind of promotion you can get, right? It's from within, and I think we get a lot of that here, so.
Well, thank you for everyone who participated, because they had to send that in, or, you know, do is it an email or whatever survey that they had. So we appreciate that and are proud that we received the award again 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that we had an outstanding clash for the first year in our new space. Lots of compliments from the visiting schools. Can't wait to come back again next year, and they were really excited that, you know, some of those schools bring upwards of 100, 115 kids plus band and 4, 5, 6 directors. And so it was very nice to have the space to sprawl out. We didn't have to turn any kids away. They could actually come in and watch. And so it was something that that you didn't see at other competitions, because a lot of times kids get kicked out so that paying visitors can come in and watch. So we didn't have to do that. So that was huge. So.
And we had all the seats, so no one was standing in the aisles or sitting a little bit, maybe.
I won't go that far when daytime awards happened and then finals happened, but it was, I was talking to, I think it might have been Josh, and I said, I think it's time for an addition to the auditorium already. So it was a full house.
Don't hold your breath on that one.
Yeah.
It was a joke, it's okay. But it was a wonderful day, and we got lots of compliments on our facility and our lettering that was hiding still behind scaffolding that day.
Oh.
So, but lots of compliments.
The scaffolding's down.
Scaffolding is down, and it does look really nice. And
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of really good compliments on it. They said it's a great advertisement for the district. And it lets I mean, you can't drive by it
Right.
and not see it. There are spotlights that are supposed to be shining on it, and they are not set correctly. So if you drive by it at night, it's not lit up very well right now, but they're supposed to be sending out their electricians to redo the spotlights.
I think
So,
all the lights need to be, because some are
Yeah.
blurry, some are right, I think, shining on the building.
On the
and
yeah,
so
they
I think
just
they
need an
all need to
adjustment.
be tweaked.
They need to be
Yeah.
adjusted at night when they can be
Well, that's
seen.
just it,
Right.
yeah. Yeah, right now, only half the sign, it's like bright light, and then in the middle in a V, it's black, so.
Yeah.
But,
Okay, then we'll go on to comments and suggestions. This is the first time during our agenda that anyone in the audience or anyone online, if they want to type something in, can address the board. And hearing none, we'll go on to our consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
This is an updated personnel sheet.
There were no changes to what was submitted in the packet.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay, vote please.
Mr. Houston?
Yes.
Mrs. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer?
Yes.
Mr. Wyledge?
Yes.
Ms. Atkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes. Report 7.01 Superintendent Report.
Yep, so I just have a few things. So we have our assistant principal, special populations coordinator position that we have advertised right now. We've received a pretty good pool of applicants. We're currently conducting phone screenings, and we will be interviewing, kind of a final interview next Tuesday. Hopefully we'll get somebody hired on that day, and we'll have somebody, at least one of our positions filled. One of the things that we also have an open, what's it called again? Student service, or the MTSS one.
School improvement.
School improvement coordinator position. So that's one too. So that's one of our partial attempts to replace Dave down there. So so that'll close here in the next week, and then we'll start that process as well. So one of the things that may throw a wrench into some of this is I do want to talk about, I don't typically talk about politics during board meetings, but I think it's important that the board and our general public know about a bill that was just passed by the Senate. It's called Senate File 251. And what it does is it restricts, the intent of the law was to restrict all executive administrative costs, which would typically include the superintendent, assistant superintendent, business manager, and the board within a category of itself, and restrict it to 5% of the overall budget. I'll tell you, here at Lewis Central, we're at like 1.4%, and across the state, the average is 1.7%. The reason I want to bring this bill up is because it was just passed in the Senate last Wednesday night that 5% would now have to encompass all administrative, non-instructional costs associated with the district, okay? And so what that means is that by expanding the amount of services that have to fit within that 5%, would include all principals, all associate principals, all curriculum people, all directors, so special education director, curriculum director, this special population, or this student services coordinator. It would include, it could potentially include, they haven't defined it at all, just as non-instructional positions. So it could include bus drivers, maintenance staff, custodians, nurses, counselors, school psychologists, technology. I mean, you name it, anything that is not a teacher teaching in the classroom could potentially have to fit under that 5%. So all of a sudden, what's currently under law appropriate at 1.4% of our total budget fits under 5%, would be expanded to include up to 12 to 13%. And that's only if I don't include bus drivers. I took bus drivers out of there because I'm like, okay, at some point you got to get kids to school, right? Mm-hmm. So if we were to do that, Lewis Central would have to cut out of personnel services approximately $2.5 million. And the reason I'm bringing this up during a board meeting is because that's simply not possible. It is not possible for us to provide education here at Lewis Central Community Schools with only teachers and no support staff. It's not possible. Teachers, regardless of what you pay them, will not work for us. And that's what they're claiming the reason for this bill is to pay teachers more. That's great. We could be the highest paying district in the nation, and if we don't support any discipline, any curriculum, any special services, any attendance, they're not going to come and work for us. It's not going to happen. So trying to figure out how we can make this work is simply not possible. It's not even that we haven't thought of it. In fact, I thought of it. And what would end up happening is we would end up having 1 or 2 custodians for each building. So you're talking 1 or 2 people cleaning 200,000 square feet. We're talking 1 secretary per building. At the high school, where we currently have 950 students, having 1 secretary, 1 principal, and 1 guidance counselor for 950 students. At Titan Hill, where you have 750 elementary students, or no, they have 900 elementary students, having 1 secretary, 1 principal, 1 guidance counselor. Dr. Reynolds, Mandy Reynolds, is sitting right here in our room right now. If this goes through, you will be it at the middle school with 750 middle school students. So that's why I'm calling this bill to light. It is not thought out well, and it will absolutely cripple districts. And it's only for districts that are in excess of 1,000 individuals. And so that includes Lewis Central. And at 3,100 students, we are still not considered a large district, but we are large enough to have to cut $2.5 million in order to fit under this law. If they were to amend the law, and it has passed the Senate, if the House amends the law to only include administration, we are currently we are considered a very low-cost administrative school, because we currently have, if you're talking just principals, 6.5%, maybe 6.6% of our total percentage of employees as principal. Now, if we include everything that fits under the administrative costs, which includes our district office personnel, which would include Andrea, our business manager, an HR person, and our district office secretary, we're sitting about 7.5%, which means that we would have to cut $550,000. If it were amended to include just administration. Now, what that means is that we would have to cut $550,000. So we're probably looking at cutting district office staff and cutting, so a curriculum coordinator or a special ed coordinator or technology coordinator would have to be cut, and then a minimum of 3 assistant principals at the buildings, minimum. And so that is just the beginning of this. And the reason I talk about that is because right now, one of the biggest complaints I get from parents is things revolving around discipline, mental health services. The legislators putting into law new laws about curriculum changes and state compliance and everything else. You know, teachers are begging for help. In fact, this year, because we ran out of ESSER money, because it just runs up, we've had to cut 3 ESSER-funded administrative positions. So we're already cutting 3 assistant principals or administrative interns out of the buildings, 1 at Titan Hill, 1 at the middle school, and 1 at Kreft, because we don't have the money. That was federal money we were given, and we knew it was going to go away, and it was going to be gone. But if we have to, and so people are saying this is ridiculous. We currently serve, it's 350 students per 1 principal right now. If we were to eliminate 3 assistant principals, we're going to have a 525 to 1 ratio students to principals. If we're really trying to serve kids and we're really trying to fix the discipline in the classrooms and help teachers with all these compliance issues that we're now supposed to be facing, and if we really want to be responsive to parents, because that's the biggest thing, right? Right now, my expectation, because of the amount of disciplinary action or things that we're dealing with right now, and a lot of it's just self-regulation with kids that just can't do it. And so if we're really supposed to be responsive, my expectation as a superintendent of schools is that our staff respond back to a parent within 48 hours. That is the expectation, and sometimes it's pushing it. If I'm going to essentially 1.5 times the amount of students that my principals are going to have to work with, then that reaction time is going to have to move. Parents will be lucky if they hear from us back within the week. And that's not how we want to do business. It's not. We want to be ultra responsive. I want to be able to pick up that phone when the parent calls. I want to be able to have a conversation with the student when they have bullying or harassment issues. I want to be able to take kids out of a classroom when a teacher needs me to take kids out of a classroom and to be able to help them in those areas. But if this bill passes, that simply won't happen. And so that's why I have to at least do my best to try to, and you can talk to any of our representatives and any of our senators in the area. I have been screaming this from the mountaintops since last week. At some point, it's the responsibility of the community and the parents and the local school boards to make the decision on how to run our schools. The legislatures from a state level dictating how to spend money and restricting those expenses is taking that out of the hands of you and those who voted for you and our parents. It simply won't be an option. And so once again, that's Senate File 251. And I would recommend contacting legislators and at least having a conversation and talking to them about how those changes will affect our school district. It will affect it. I'm not telling you to be pro or against it, I'm just telling you how it affects it. Anyway, on to other things. So we also have a facilities committee meeting. We're gonna do a community committee. So in the last board work session that we got together, you guys tasked me with putting together a community facility committee, and just with a smaller group of community members and a wide variety of community members, and talking with them about what it was that you guys set as kind of priorities. And the priorities that you guys set at that time had to do with 3 areas. And number 1 was make sure that we're taking care of our infrastructure that badly needs to be taken care of. Number 2 was taking a look at the middle school in general, because that's pretty much where the majority of our issues lie, because it is our oldest building. And then number 3 is to look at making sure that we're taking care of our early childhood needs, which could potentially involve some expansion because we just don't have the space for additional preschool, additional daycare, et cetera. And so those are the 3 areas. So I will present them with those options next week, and I'll just look for feedback. And, at the end of the day, this has to be a community decision because it affects our community, and it affects our kids, it affects our homeowners, it affects business owners. We want to do what's best by kids, and we need to be responsive to what the community is telling us we need to do. So I think that was very wise of you guys to say and I've had a great response so far of those individuals that you guys have recommended. It's been a pretty good response. I think we'll have quite a few people there. So,
Okay.
any questions from you guys? No.
Well, I think
I
we're
told
good.
Brian I wouldn't get so far into the weeds with that last one, but I apologize for that. I guess I lied, so. But
With the politics?
with the politics, just a bill, one bill.
Yeah, but then it does need to be brought out to Lewis Central, because this is going to affect us.
It will, absolutely. Yep.
Absolutely.
And it will be, and when parents and staff members are upset that we're not providing services, just so you guys know, it will be 100% out of your hands. It's nothing you can do. The only people that can affect it right now are the state representatives and the state senators who vote on this bill. And so if people want to make a difference, that would be what they can do, is contact those individuals.
Right. Okay, we'll go on to 7.02, budget presentation.
Turn over to Andrea.
All right, so our certified budget for this year, I will say we are doing it a little bit differently, but that has to do with the valuations being figured incorrectly. So we had to wait for legislature to come in and approve a bill for us to have updated valuations. So those did not have to be filed until 15 days after the legislature was approved. And now that that has happened, in order for us to have our public hearing published in time, we will have our public hearing at the April 3rd board meeting, as opposed to this evening when we normally would have it. So I'm going to present what is being published, and then we will hold our public hearing at the April 2nd meeting. So to start off, the budget process begins in October 1st with the certified enrollment. So you will see our certified enrollment is for the most part trending upward. We did have an increase this year. As well as on the next slide, you will see our open enrollment trends. The white line is our open enrollment in, the black line is our open enrollment out, and the gray line is our net. So our in has been pretty steady, our out has been increasing, so obviously our net has been decreasing a little bit, but we are looks like we're possibly back into that upward trend of where we would like that to be. Our open enrollment does not directly affect our levy rates, but it does play a huge factor in our miscellaneous income for the district, more than for most districts. The next factor is state supplemental aid. SSA for this year is 3%. It is the highest, or second highest in 10 years, as you can see. And it is an increase of $222 per student for a total of $7,635 per student for fiscal year '24. The next thing is the property tax valuation. Our property taxes have been steadily increasing as well, with the exception of 1 year in there. And we did have just a slight increase this year. Part of that was from that valuation rollback, refiguring that they did have to do. So that took us back a little bit from what we originally thought we were going to be at. As you can see as well, our TIFs are still very low, and have been trending at about that 2% for the last couple of years. The next slide is our property tax rate. The property tax rate that we are proposing for FY24 is $10.29, which is just a slight increase from FY23. It is a 5-cent increase. And that increase of 5% does include our total 50-cent increase for our voted PEPAL that was voted in September. This comparison is for FY23. So this is our current year, not looking at the FY24 that was proposed, but you can look at that number in there and kind of notice that we are very low compared to our surrounding districts. This includes Atlantic, Harlan, Council Bluffs, Glenwood, Trainer, and Underwood. The next closest one is Harlan at $11.35, so we're more than $1 less than any of our neighboring districts as well. So even taking in our slight increase, we would still be well under what any neighboring district was at, unless they had a significant decrease this coming year. Our property tax levy is made up of items that are state controlled, voter controlled, or board controlled. So in our total levy this year will generate $16.5 million in property tax revenue. The board controlled portion is a cash reserve, could be a cash reserve levy, which we do not have one currently. Our regular PEPAL, which is the 33% or 33-cent PEPAL, and our management PEPAL. The next items are our voter controlled levy, which is our voted PEPAL, debt service if we had one, but we currently do not have one, and our instructional support levy. So the voted PEPAL makes up 55% of our voter controlled levy, and the instructional support makes up 45%. And the last portion is the largest portion, and it is the state controlled portion, and that all is funded through the state foundation formula. The next slide is our proposed levy rate in detail. So you'll see that the levy rate of $10.29 is made up of $8.33 in general fund levy, 62 cents in management levy, and $1.33 in total PEPAL. So that's the regular PEPAL and the voted PEPAL. So if you're comparing it to last year, our general fund levy is down slightly, management fund levy is down slightly as well, and then we had the increase in the voter approved PEPAL from the vote in September. So our total levy is $10.29,049 for FY24 is the proposed levy. This graph here shows our tax rate throughout the past 10 years and the makeup of the levy for each year. So your bottom portion is the dark blue, which is the general fund portion. The next light blue is the management. The PEPAL, voted, and regular are the two grays, and then the debt service, which we currently do not have, but we did have back in FY 15 through FY 18 is the debt service for the GO bond that was there. So you'll kind of see a little bit of a slight decrease after FY 18. The other decrease comes in FY 22 when the cash reserve levy stopped as well. So with the general fund budget, we have budgeted revenues of just slightly over $38 million. Just slightly over 50% of that comes from local funding. So that's property taxes, tuition from other local school districts for open enrollment. And then there's also 46% of that comes from state, so that's our state aid and our categoricals. And then approximately 3% of it is federal funding, which is our title dollars and IDEA. The budgeted expenditures for FY24 are approximately $38 million, with 67% of that going to direct instruction, 10% for support services, approximately 8% to the administration, and 11% for operations and transportation, and then 4% of it that is an automatic flow through to the AEA that is directed by the state.
And what I'll point out is when she says 8% administration, one of the things we have to include in that one is any district office personnel. So that's why, you know, gets bumped up from about the 7% I'd mentioned that were principals. It includes Andrea, Anna, HR, Josh, I mean, includes all of those other support pieces that are considered in the funding code under administration. They do not receive administrator contracts, but.
All right, and the next sheet is our unspent authorized budget. I know there's a lot on here and the print can be a little bit small, but the biggest number that we want to look at on this one is line 34. So it's the second to the last line with numbers on it, and that is our unspent authorized budget. So as you can see in FY20, it was extremely low at $162,000. So over the last few years, it has been our goal to increase it every year and continue to increase it going forward. We are projecting obviously an increase at the end of this year and a nice increase again next year. The target that we're looking at getting to is on this next slide, and it also takes into consideration our solvency ratio. So at the end of FY24, it is our goal to have our unspent authorized budget at around 7%, and our solvency ratio will be around 24%. So it would put us in the category, a green category that we haven't been in for quite a while, but we know that we still have some work to do because we would still be on the very low side of the UAB percentage of where we want it to be. So we will still continue to keep working to increase that UAB and also making sure that our solvency ratio does not climb any higher than what it is. So as I discussed at the beginning, moving forward, we have our budget presentation this evening. The budget will actually be published tomorrow in the Nopperell with the proposed budget. We will have the public hearing on April 3rd and the adoption of the budget. Normally by April 15th, we would have to file with the county auditor. We do have an extension this year with the valuation adjustments to May 1st, but if everything goes as planned and we have our public hearing and adoption on April 3rd, I will still file prior to April 15th. Are there any questions?
So if you can go back to the property tax comparison. So one of the things that I'd like to point out here, so Harlan, who's the second closest to us, they just approved in September a $2.30 bond. So their general obligation bond. So their tax rate's actually going to be $13.68. And that's assuming nothing else changes in there. So, in comparison, every district around us is at least $3 higher than where we are. So, just wanted to point that out.
Is there any questions? Okay, we'll have the hearing then the next board meeting.
Yes.
Will you review this again?
Yep, I will do a shorter
Okay.
version of it, but yes, I will review the levy rates that are being proposed.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, Andrea. And we'll go now to our discussion items. 8.01, proposed 2023-2024 calendar change.
So I guess I kind of already presented the calendar change. Do you guys have any questions in regards to, or comments? Maybe in the future, take a look at, and I can send a survey out about the graduation date for the future. But for this next year, do you guys have any questions regarding calendar? Comments, concerns?
And you have up there the proposed changes to
Yep,
the
so
start
those,
times.
yep, so those are times, so that's not really a calendar consideration, that's just an FYI. So along with this calendar consideration, we're looking to, one of the things I heard came back in the survey and that I've talked to parents about is the difficulty in getting from building to building here. So specifically when you have because we don't have neighborhood schools, when you have a student that attends Titan Hill and a student that attends Craft, just making sure that you have the adequate time to go from one building to the next, because by the time you get up to one building, the clock starts ticking. And so if you get up there and you're late in line, I mean, people start lining up in the morning as early as, 7 o'clock, 7:10, just so that way they can be the first to let their kids out when they can at 8:10, and then bust it down the Craft to be able to make it. So if you're late to drop your kid off at one building or the next, it makes it very, very difficult to make the other building on time. And so to try to alleviate that, and it's not the best because we do a lot of collaboration between our buildings. So to try to alleviate it, I did talk to the buildings about changing reporting times a little bit. So we will, starting next year, have Titan Hill reporting, the teachers will report 7:50 to 3:50, which means that the doors will open at 8 o'clock, and then we'll start at 2:25. We'll do dismissal at 3:15 or 2:15 on an early out. And so, and then the teachers will report from 8:05 to 4:05, so it's a 15-minute offset, which means that the doors open at 8:15, start at 8:40, end at 3:30, and at 2:30. So we actually add back some time, quite a bit of time, about 10 minutes a day for CREFT. But I think it's good. It keeps kids in the building a little bit longer, and it also allows parents 15 minutes difference. And for our bus drivers, and this was kind of just a happy coincidence, and I don't know if it's a happy coincidence because it's hard to find bus drivers. So if we have to next year combine some of the routes, so that way we have to have this one bus pick and drop off Titan Hill and Craft kids. Right now we have them completely separated, but if we have to combine routes and have one bus for a neighborhood pick up both Titan Hill and Craft kids, this allows them the time they need to be able to drop off at one school and then drive over to the other school and drop off at the other school. And so it's kind of a happy coincidence. I think that there are some people that this will be difficult for, but by and large, I think it should be very helpful, not only to, some people that are used to coming to work at 8, they're gonna have to adjust 10 minutes to 7:50. Doesn't sound like a lot, but people that have been doing it for 20 years, I think it'll be like, holy moly, 10 minutes earlier. So there'll be some adjustment time. We will be very patient with that, but at the end of the day, I guess I'd like to hear what kind of your feedback is, and the few people I've tossed it out to, teachers seem to be very on board with it, for the most part. Parents will be on board with it, so. Thoughts?
I love it.
Okay,
I think it's great,
so.
because I was one of those parents that had to do the rush.
It is a deal. So, but yeah, so it will hopefully alleviate some of those issues. So,
Is there any questions on the calendar? Okay, we'll go to 8.02, local government risk pool participation.
yep, let Andrea talk about it.
So this is the local government risk pool for our natural gas. So what this risk pool does is it locks in what our gas will be for the next year. And they base it off of what the prices they're able to lock in on, and usually, or they figure what we are going to use. But if we do not use it, or if we use more, it does not adjust. But usually, we will get a dividend at the end of the year as well to make up for that. So it is like an insurance versus our normal natural gas that we have at home. So the nice thing about this as well is it is a shift of our expenditures from the general fund to the management fund. So it frees up some of those funds to use towards other general fund expenditures as well. Any questions?
Is there any questions? Does this go year by year?
Yes, so each year we do have to renew our participation agreement with them. And each year they reassess our premiums, obviously based on usage, and then what gas is projected to be at or what they are purchasing at.
Any questions, discussion? Okay, we'll go to 8.03, personnel matter regarding employee resignations. By Iowa code, we are allowed to have this in closed session. Can I get a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mrs. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer?
Yes.
Mr. Wyledge?
Yes.
Ms. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Houston?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffel?
Yes. All right, we are back from closed session, and this is the second time during our agenda. We have comments and suggestions. If anyone from the audience or if anyone stayed online waiting for us to come back from closed session, you can address the board. All right, hearing none, we'll go on to our action items. 10.01, proposed 2023-24 calendar change.
One note I did want to make on that, Dave, and Dave called me to it, is there is one additional change in August. It's on the calendar the way it is. But with adding another professional development day at the beginning of the year, it was determined that instead of using, we typically have 3 new teacher onboarding days, that's going to be reduced to 2. So 2 new teacher onboarding days. So just because the additional PD day with everybody and staff, that's typically what they do on the 3rd day anyway, is go meet with all the staff and kind of get in their rooms and that kind of stuff. So it goes from 3 to 2.
Okay,
Madam President,
Mr. Stoffer.
I'd like to make a recommendation to approve the changes to the 2023-2024 school calendar changes as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
Thank you for the work put into this. It was a feat, and it's a great compromise to make most people happy.
Right. And I think it's good that we're just doing the 1 year,
Yeah.
Yep.
and then we'll see, so we can tweak it the next year, and hopefully we can get back to where we're doing 2 years.
Yeah.
But for now, I think that's good with getting all the input from everyone. Okay. Vote, please.
Mrs. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer?
Yes.
Mr. Wylage?
Yes.
Ms. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Houston?
Yes.
Mrs. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheppel?
Yes. 10.02, local government risk pool participation.
Madam President,
Mr. Stoffer.
I'd like to make a recommendation to approve the local government risk pool participation agreement with the local government risk pool commission.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Stoffer?
Yes.
Mr. Wylage?
Yes.
Ms. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Houston?
Yes.
Mrs. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheppel?
Yes. 10.03, personnel matter regarding employee resignation.
Madam President,
Mr. Stoffer.
I'd like to make a motion that we decline the requested resignation.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Wylage?
Yes.
Ms. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Houston?
Yes.
Mrs. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheppel?
Yes. Items of interest, future board meetings. Our next regular meeting will be April 3rd, 2023, which will include the budget hearing. Anything else?
Nope, I will communicate the calendar changes to all staff and parents tomorrow. So
All right.
they can start planning.
Okay. With that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So, second.
You got that, Andrea?
Yes.
All right, everyone in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I guess you can stay. Thanks for coming.